Hey everyone, and welcome. I am so thrilled you're joining me for today's explainer. We're looking at a deeply critical, rapidly escalating situation that's unfolding right now. We're talking about the cascading effects of India's intense heat waves. We are looking at temperatures that are pushing the absolute limits of human, environmental, and infrastructural endurance. It's truly wild. So, what does it actually take to survive when the thermometer hits the half-century mark? Okay, let's dive into this. 48 degrees Celsius. Let that number sink in for a second. To really understand the terrifying, visceral reality of a temperature like that, you have to hear the story of Rampart. He's a farmer in northern India. Last May, at 48 degrees, his life literally changed in a matter of seconds. The bamboo house he had lived in his entire life went up in flames. But here's the crazy part. It didn't catch fire from a stray spark or a dropped match. The fire service determined that the highly flammable bamboo walls spontaneously combusted. They just burst into flames simply because the sun's rays were that scorching hot. So, Section 1, Life at 50 degrees. This is our new baseline. This intense heat is setting a terrifying precedent across northern India. It's arriving earlier, it's escalating faster, and it's hotter than ever before. Going back to Rampart's story, the tragedy didn't just stop with his house. That same spontaneous fire swept right through and wiped out his entire crop. Think about that, instant devastation. Today, he and his wife are forced to live in their barn. They're sharing that tiny space with the only two buffaloes they managed to rescue from the flames. Their entire livelihood, the whole shebang, just erased by the sun. And this brilliantly illustrates a much broader, catastrophic agricultural crisis. When you zoom out from Rampart's farm, you see a scorched countryside that hasn't seen a drop of rain in a year. The soil is severely cracked, vital rivers and lakes, they're simply running dry. And thousands upon thousands of livestock have died in recent months, purely from the relentless heat and a total lack of water. Which brings us to Section 2, a nation running dry. That massive lack of water transitions us to an immediate, secondary crisis for everyday citizens. To really grasp the scale here, consider this stark contrast. India is the world's most populated country, right? Yet, it possesses a mere 4% of the planet's total water resources. 4%. When you combine that incredibly tight margin with record-breaking heat waves that are actively evaporating existing reserves, well, you have a perfect recipe for severe nationwide water stress. And this macro data translates into some truly grueling daily realities. Take Shailendra Kuma and his wife Suman, for example. Their local water supplies completely dried up. So twice a day, they take a cart on a 3-kilometer trek to the nearest functioning well. But here is the truly agonizing part. Because the extreme heat frequently causes the district's electricity network to fail, the pump at that distant well often just stops working. They make that exhausting journey in the blistering heat, only to return home in the evening with totally empty buckets. And it is definitely not just rural areas suffering. Even in the capital, New Delhi, the groundwater has run dry. In certain districts, residents are forced to rely entirely on a single tanker truck that arrives just once a day. Imagine that, one single water tank expected to serve 4,000 thirsty people. Section 3, the human body overheats. Let's move to and see how this builds from a macro water crisis down to a microscopic battle. How does all this translate to the inside of the human body? Well, consider this absolutely alarming figure. 107 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the core rectal temperature of a construction worker who was recently rushed into a brand new, specialized heat unit at a public hospital in New Delhi. He had been working outside in a building site, totally exposed to the intense heat for hours without drinking nearly enough water. He was suffering from a critical condition known as heat stress. The medical science behind this is fascinating, but honestly, it's pretty terrifying. When you become completely dehydrated, your body's internal cooling system catastrophically fails. You literally become physically unable to sweat. And without sweat to evaporate and cool the skin, your body completely loses its ability to regulate its own internal temperature. You basically begin to cook from the inside out. In the hospital, the intervention is incredibly high stakes. The emergency protocol? Immediate submersion in an ice bath for 20 minutes. Because the body can no longer cool itself, the doctors have to do it artificially, and they have to do it rapidly. It's a race against the clock. Every single second counts to prevent irreversible brain damage or total heart failure. Thankfully, that specific construction worker's life was saved, but hundreds of others have died in recent months. And the harsh reality here is unavoidable. The poorest classes, those who work outside, those without air conditioning, are overwhelmingly the most vulnerable. They just can't escape it. This urgent need has prompted local organizations to step up and intervene. That leads us into Section 4, Adapting to the Inferno. Let's look at some ground-level solutions. So how do communities actually adapt to this? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer simplicity of some of these interventions. In Western India, an NGO is helping those most in need by just painting the roofs of their homes a reflective white. That's it. By reflecting the sun's rays instead of absorbing them, this incredibly straightforward solution drops the indoor heat by an average of 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. Since the start of the heat waves this year, more than 6,000 people have benefited from this one project. And look at these financials. This breaks down exactly why this is such an effective emergency response. The total procedure costs around 20 euros. The NGO funds the vast majority of it, 16 euros, meaning the cost to the local resident is just 4 euros. It makes a literal life-saving drop in temperature highly accessible for low-income families who are trying to simply survive the summer. But of course, we all know a coat of paint alone isn't going to solve the massive, overarching challenges of global warming. Authorities know this too. The real wake-up call happened back in May of 2010 in Ahmedabad, which is a megacity of 8 million people. A devastating heat wave killed 800 people in the space of just 1 week. That tragedy forced authorities to really wake up and start developing massive, long-term urban adaptation plans. One of the leaders of this effort, Abhiyan Tiwari, is working with the government to create what he calls greenospheres. These are actual urban oases planted right in the middle of these sprawling concrete jungles. They use an amazing Japanese dense forestation technology known as the Miyawaki technique. Basically, this involves planting dozens of different species of trees and shrubs in very small, concentrated areas to rapidly create natural cooling zones. The difference these green spaces make is absolutely staggering. So, the crucial point is comparing these two realities. Standard city brick or concrete during a heat wave sits at a blistering 55 degrees Celsius. But step inside one of these Miyawaki forests, and the temperature plunges by an incredible 20 degrees Celsius. In a concrete world, these literally become islands of survival. But listen, we cannot look at this as an isolated problem. Abhiyan Tiwari issued a very specific warning to the rest of the globe. He noted that what feels like 50 degrees to a population in India is exactly the shock to the system that 35 or 40 degrees might feel like in many parts of Europe. And as he notes, Europe, and frankly the rest of the world, is not immune to it. This isn't just India's problem, guys. It is a looming global reality. And the timeline? It's moving way faster than we might think. Current climate records suggest that 2024 could be the absolute hottest year on record in India. The heat is escalating, it's setting dangerous new precedents right now, and it is testing the limits of these emergency protocols and green spaces in real time. Which brings us to our final, deeply sobering thought. Scientists estimate that whole swaths of the country could become entirely uninhabitable as a result of the heat by the year 2050. Let that sink in. It forces us to ask a really profound question. If the world's most populated regions become too hot for the human body to even endure, where exactly will all of those people go? And how will the rest of the planet adapt when the mercury continues to rise? Thank you so much for exploring this vital explainer with me today, and keep asking the hard questions. See you next time.